Okay. In CPS 121, I just had them write 3 programs at the end of class. We were working with if then else statements. And the first one was simply calculate pay with overtime, which all of you can go whoop whoop and done, and off you go. In my 162 class that was before this one, we spent 95% of the time drawing pictures and making test data, different options, and writing pseudocode. So you're going to soon be somewhere in the middle. Try to get in this habit, because when you do test data, you start to pick up patterns and you realize it's easy to write an algorithm to go along with it. And that algorithm that you just had, this would have been perfect for it. Did you make up test data for all those cases? Did you walk through it? Did you post on the discussion board, hey, by the way, if the rate's 20 and the hours is 50, what's the final value someone got? You can do that. I don't have a problem with it. You realize this to be a biggie as you go through programming this whole odd and even thing. So they did that. And then we had an if statement. If the discriminant is greater than 0, it's fine using the quadratic formula to find 2 roots. But if it's not, if it's a negative, we have to sort of play around with it, change it to a positive, and then display an I as part of our answer. They really didn't get to this, but if statements, how we're working with all that. So test data, we came in and we looked at the extremes. Okay, $20 an hour, I worked 1 hour. It's nice and simple. Rate times time. So at some point, I'm going to start to delete numbers and put in variable names. Extremes. What if the hours was 0? Excuse me. What if the hours were -1? I might have to put a check in to make sure that doesn't happen. What if the rate is 0? Wouldn't be very happy. I didn't get paid. Straight, simple data. Again, trying to find a formula. I know stuff happens at 40. So maybe I need to test 39, 40, 41 kind of deal. Notice all these numbers are nice 10s and 20s and 40s. Reality is, wait a minute, I could have had a rate of $28.50 an hour, and my hours could have been 46 and a half. That's now all of a sudden putting me into detail of, yeah, maybe even though these were nice and easy in integers, maybe I should have considered, well, I have to consider doubles become important as well. I have my first 40 hours, which that 40 is a constant, but this 20 is my rate. I have my overtime. That 20 is still my rate. That 1.5 is a constant. And this is a calculation, because I have problems when I have more hours than 40. I need an if statement. And again, that's what we were on in class. But this is kind of me making you get back to thinking this is a good idea to get into this habit, putting down all the test data. From there, all of a sudden, I'm like, yeah, I needed the rate and the hours. I did a quick check for non-overtime. My overtime came right from this formula. The variable times the constant, the variable times the calculation times the constant, which gave me my pay. And when I was done, I typed in 20 and 50 and got, well, I never calculated it. I got my answer. So doing these steps are going to make these steps better and also ensure your program works. And kind of was looking for that when you did your last program. And those that got it in early, I was able to grade them. Not always a guarantee. Gave you some feedback. But as you know, you can always resubmit before the deadline. Whether you learn something new that you want to resubmit it as, or maybe you realize you had an error and want to resubmit it. Okay. And again, I went and made up test data for your programs, scribbled and wrote and looked at some things and, all of that. And again, that's what I'm using for your program. Questions? All right, we're just rolling right along. We're on chapter 5. Da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da. And I don't know where I have it, but I gave it to you. You have a pretty good idea of what's going on. We had that first week we didn't meet. We did chapter 3, chapter 4, chapter 5 today. And all of a sudden you're like, okay, that's 4 down and 11 to go. We're like, well, yeah, we got some stuff going on. Next week we do chapter 6, and then midweek you have that first test where you're going to take it on your own during a certain day and time, which is outlined in the news. There's another test. There's the final. So we're like next week's a third of the way through the course. Okay, chew on that for a little bit. You just started to love me and now it's almost over. What can you do? Okay. Going over loops again. Running through. Before I get started, I have the pre-increment, I have the post-increment. When I start this, I might, yeah, X is 6 and Y is 8. Something that's lost, hand tracing variables as you go through the program. Way back when, we used to make a list of our variables and write down the values as we went, and they changed and so forth to make sure things were working. But in this case, if I say X is 6 and Y is 8, what's the new values for X and Y? Chickens. Come on, somebody give me a guess.
X is
X would be
9.
9.
X is 9, Y is
I think still just 8, right?
9.
Y is 9. Okay. Pre, I have the assignment operator, but because it comes before, it says increment Y first. So Y would now get the value of 9, then assign it to X. Over here, we start X out as 6, Y is 8. Values
8, 9.
8 and 9. Right. Quickie review. Y gets assigned first and then incremented. We like this one. Most of the time we've used this, but I just wanted to point out we have this other option, but be careful with what you're doing. A lot of times this is Y equals Y plus plus. It's what you're familiar with. Okay. Little more breadth than you had before with loops. First type of loop, the only type we need is a while loop. To give me a while loop, I don't need a for loop. I don't need a do loop, as you know. While loop runs 0 or more times. I come down and I come into my decision. My decision might have relational operators, might have logical operators, but if it's true or it's false, if it's false, we do a body and we go back up and run again. False, we keep going, we keep going. True gets me out. And we could write this where this is the true statement and this is the false, but it's going to evaluate out as true or false, one or the other. Okay. It has what's called a pretest. It tests before it gets into the body. This is good for input validation. I can check the number. Is it a negative? Please get a new number and go back up and keep going until we get a good number. Input validation. While left brace, right brace, a Boolean statement. Again, you already know 8-point question on your test. Relational and logical operators. Okay. So when we get to working with loops, and it's all 3 types, there are 3 parts to every loop. 3 things that need included. One is an initial or starting value. Lots of different ways to get this bad boy up and running. But a lot of times we do something like X equals 0. We have a check. That's this decision box. We check for true or false. And then we have some sort of increment, update, input again, those types of things. What's really important in our loop is the variable that controls the loop. The variable that controls the loop. It's like the factors that are common and we want the greatest, we call the greatest common factor. We call this the loop control variable. You're like, yeah, okay, sounds good, sounds familiar. Simple example, initial value, check, increment. What if I don't have an increment? Well, it's gone.
You're gonna be there a while.
Yes. Or you realize real quick you screwed up. It's an infinite loop. This is one of those runtime errors. A syntax error was a typing error. This is a runtime error. Good. Hey, once again, I'm going to keep going. If you have to ask a question or slow me down, do it. Just do it. Loop number 2, you see the flowchart layout. This time, the body is before the decision box. This guy runs at least one time. This is a nice run again option. It also works great for menu programs where you come in, you display the menu, do whatever, da 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 da. Was the choice this or that? You go back up and do it again. Most common is run again options. Okay. It's called a post test. Good. Comes after the body. Simple example. Initial value, increment or update. Here's my check. My loop control variable is my X. And finally, the one you use most of the time because we know exactly how many times we want to run the program, and that's the for loop. We have an initial value, we have the test, we have the update. But this is, we must know the number of times we want this program to run. I went kind of quick there, but you got the idea. I am putting you in groups today. Ba-dum. Da-da. Oh, not yet. Before I put you in, a couple of notes. A nested loop, a loop inside of a loop. Okay. In working with files, you're familiar with maybe row your boat. Kind of good with arrays and all of that. One thing I want to mention is a sentinel value. I want to exit from a loop. Please enter -1 to get out of a loop. It's a value that's not, you're entering test scores -1 and blah, blah, blah. In the old days, 9999 was a common one. Everybody liked 9999. No idea what that's for, but that looks good. Something that I would have talked about. Okay. 2 programs, because the concepts of loop are good. I need you to practice them. A lot less lecture than you had in 121 for now. Once we start getting to new stuff, I'll be talking a lot more. I want you to write a program pennies for pay. A bunch of you had me in 121. It was payday. Okay. So I want you to write this first. Then I want you to do input validation. And then finally, put this run again option around it. Don't try to start and go all the way through. Get this part working first, this part working second, this part working third. So what do we need in pennies for pay? I need a day 1 amount, initial amount. How much did you make on your first day? Something small.
50 bucks.
$45.
Good. 2 cents. 2 cents. Now, every day you get a multiplier. Like you made 2 cents on the first day, But when I go to, so on day one, you made 2 cents. What would you make on day two? Well, whatever the multiplier is. What's the multiplier? Give me something.
2.
Good. 4. Why did I not use 2 and 2? Because I don't want to mix the twos up right now. So when you look at this, you'll know the next day is 8. Day 3 is 32 cents.
For calling Hackett, Central Pennsylvania.
Next thing I need to know is how many days. So you're going to input the number of days. 4. Day. 4. So I need one more. Multiplier of 4 is 128. Total?
One 170?
Yeah.
170 cents, but that's going to equal $1.70. You're going to input 3 things. Ching, ching, ching. Guess what I just did? I did test data. I kind of just did some test data for you. I calculate day 1. I should probably have a running total. 2, 10, 42, 170, which is $1.70. Okay. So working with C++, I want you to write this program. Again, get this part working first, then get this part working. What do we want for? Let's make sure that days is greater than 1 and less than 100. Okay. Add that part for input validation. Again, this is a for loop. This is going to be a while loop. Add the run again option. Second program, I want you to simulate the rolling of a dice. The rolling of a dice. You're going to roll it 6,000 times. You're going to keep track of the number of ones, the number of 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, and 6s. What should each one of these numbers be close to? 1,000. Yeah, these should all be approximately 1,000. So you're going to count them as you go, which means I need to learn how to use the what? Random number generator. Wait, I want 6 numbers. This gives me 0 to 5. But when I add 1, I get the numbers 1 to 6. Okay, that's that offset that we have to add. How many numbers? Where do I want to start? And then I want you to send the totals to a data file. Well, that's a little more than I first looked at this and thought, this might be fairly easy, but now that I'm looking at it, there's some meat and potatoes in both of these. Any questions?
Oh, yeah, what, do we need to import anything? The pound include at the beginning to use a random number generator?
Oh, no, it's probably in the book.
Fair enough.
You got where I want these groups to go. I want 1 or 2 with books, 1 or 2, or 1 typing, 1 spot checking. We're going to go with groups of 4. I have 17 students, so one group's going to have 5 in. Don't be a bully. I mean, don't be a dictator. Don't be a freeloader. If we start having freeloaders, then after a while, you go, by the way, Professor, when we make groups up, can I not work with Kyle because he never has his camera on and he doesn't say anything and he's no help?
Always.
And
I
then
can
when
vouch for that.
And then when I get that list, I'll just put them in a group together and then they'll just sit there and not get anywhere. So be an active participant. That's the best way to learn. All right. Everybody has seen this page and made